Are you ever challenged with what to do with so much green in a landscape painting? Well, in today's lesson, I'm going to be teaching you 3 strategies that can help you to tackle that green monster when there is an overwhelming amount of green in a landscape. So welcome into Monet Cafe Studio, and here we go. Before we get started, I'd like to share with you more about the products and my reference image. I'm really excited about this lesson because I'm going to be painting on a board today. I often paint on soft pastel surfaces, but I don't often use boards. And I have a whole nother video. This is a DIY pastel board. I did it myself, and I have a whole video sharing how I made this board. Now that video will be coming soon, but I wanted to share the pastel surface that I used is UArt sanded pastel paper. I have loved this surface, but I've had a challenge with it. It curls and it's caused me not to use it, but I found a way to take all of those UArt pages and papers that I have and to mount them to a board. Now, here's some good news. UArt has just started making their own peel and stick pastel paper. So you can find it on Dakota Pastels, and I'll have more about that in my upcoming video. And here's a close-up of my board that I created using my own mounting method. It's an 8x10 board that I made, and I want to paint all the way to the edges. So I have a system where I use artist tape, and I love my limb tape dispenser here. It's hands-free. It makes it so easy to pull the tape off. And I have a little method or technique of how I mount my board, and I share all of that and more about it over on my Patreon page, and I'll share more about how to become a patron if you would like to later in this video. And here's where I have my board attached to my painting surface. And now let's talk about this reference image. All right, so we are painting a beautiful mountain scene. I have found so many images on unsplash.com. It's a great site for copyright-free reference images. And I found a beautiful one that I'm going to be painting today. Isn't this image absolutely beautiful? You just want to be in that field looking at those mountains. But let's face it, that's a lot of green. I mean, the whole image is primarily green, yellow, and some blues in the sky. So how do we tackle a reference image that we love, but we don't want to overwhelm it with so much green? And I have found a wonderful way to solve this problem is to choose a color that's not in the reference image, obviously not green, and create a base of some color that's going to complement this painting. And I often use golden colors, but I didn't want to use it in this case. I've got these golden flowers, so I decided on some beautiful purples that I'll lay down first that will be a beautiful base to peek through many of these greens. And I want to give a quick shout out to this pastel manufacturer from Paris. Am I saying this right? La Pastellerie. And it is a little set of 6 they sent to me complimentary. This was the first time I tried any of these pastels, and oh, did I love this little green for some grasses. So I'll be talking about that. And here's another little tip. If you print out your reference image, you can test your pastels right there on the printout. While I'm not necessarily trying to match colors with this process, I'm really focusing more on values. So it's just a neat little way to check to see if your values are too light or too dark by going ahead and making a little mark on your reference image. So I'm going to speed this up for you, but I wanted you to see my process for choosing these pastels. And that little palette tray that I'm using, by the way, is from a set of drawers. It's like a little art cabinet. I got this one on Amazon. I'll put a link for it in the description of this video. But I find these make great little palettes for separating your colors out when you're beginning a pastel painting. And I think these are a pretty affordable option for beginner pastel artists who might like to have a storage system for their pastels. And I find, however, that I have been using them more for my little palettes just to arrange my pastels during a painting, which they work great for that too. And you can see here, they are affordable and they come in different amounts of drawers, which is nice. And I'm going to pan here so you can see these colors kind of slowly. By the way, I did not use all of these colors. I wanted to pull a lot of colors out so I didn't have to fiddle with going and finding more colors. On the right there I used only, I think, 3, maybe 4 of those purples for my base, for my underpainting, which is going to make these greens look so much more exciting. I'm popping up the reference image again to show you once more how much green is overtaking this image. I mean, look at the grasses in the foreground. It's basically green with yellow flowers. So the point of this video is to give you some strategies to learn how to tackle all of this green. And the first strategy is to start at the very beginning of a painting. I am going to lay down this beautiful purple underpainting just with different values of purple, which is going to serve as an underlayment of color to complement, peek through, and add visual interest to the final painting. Now, I'm using my pastel here just to lay it on its side and get in some big value shapes. Basically, the foreground is pretty dark, so that's why I laid it on its side and did some dark vertical movements. And with the evergreen trees, I just gave some shapes that are like evergreens. And now I am getting in it's more of a periwinkle, it's kind of a blue color, for the first level of mountains. And usually at the base of mountains, typically, they're a little bit darker. So I added a little bit more of a darker value and this little lavender purple here into the bottom of the mountain. And now I'm adding a little bit of that same color into the foreground. Now, I have some clouds here that do have some heavy, shadowy areas full of rain. So I'm just capturing their movement, their gesture. They get a little lighter as they go into the distance. And none of these things at the very beginning are so set in stone that you just have to worry so much about where everything is. Now, I don't want to give you the false impression that you can just be haphazard and willy-nilly, but at this block-in stage of a painting, we're just trying to get those big shapes and, more importantly, those values. Now, this looks a little crazy right now. I think sometimes I lose people at the beginnings of my videos. I'm now adding a little more dark value. I noticed that original purple that I used wasn't quite dark enough. Can you see in the reference image I've superimposed? What are the darkest things? It's these trees and the foreground grasses. The mountains in the distance, I mean, they appear dark, but they're really a lot lighter than anything else in the scene. And so I'm using my artistic license just to add a few elements and some trees to balance things out on the left side. Now, this is a point where you have a few options. If you're not working on a water-friendly surface, you can simply blend these colors. Now, I am holding up a little tool here. I often forget to talk about it. It's called a pastel smoothie. I will have a link for these in the description of this video. And they come in a pack of 3 sizes. They're pretty affordable on Amazon. And as you can see, you're able to really blend the pastels quite nicely. By the way, you could also use a stencil brush if you have any type of a brush that you use for stenciling projects. But I'm going to do a wet underpainting. I'm working on this UArt paper that is water friendly, and I could have used water, but I always get asked this, why did you use rubbing alcohol instead of water? Well, alcohol dries faster. It's just faster for the whole video production. I use this little ball jar. I've got it filled up about 1/4 of the way, and I have various brushes here. I end up, I think, just using mostly those 2 brushes. They are very textural. I don't even know when I got this brush. It's something from China. Somebody said they thought it was a basting brush, like for basting turkeys. So always feel free to improvise as an artist. I like to have some paper towels handy. I just fold them up so I can control the amount of alcohol or water. You could totally use water at this point on my brush. So I'm just dipping it. You can see it's a little drippy, and I just dab it onto my paper towel just to get a little bit of that excess alcohol off. And sometimes you want it a little more wet than others. And in this case, I want it just kind of a middle wetness. I'm speeding this up because you can really see it come to life better. So I'm giving these energetic vertical marks. Look at the reference image. It's all these tall grasses. And then I'm just kind of blending and even blurring these trees just a little bit. I am not worried at this point about getting all of those little, these are obviously evergreen trees. I'm not worried about getting all of those little leaves and branches and aspects of this tree just perfect. As As a matter of fact, I want them a little bit blob-ish. That'll make more sense later. So I wanted to point out I am dipping my brush back into the alcohol. I never rinsed my brush at this point. I learned this from another artist. It's like the alcohol in the jar just kind of rinses your brush for you. So as you can see, I'm blending the clouds in the sky, and now I'm getting to that background mountain that was a pretty blue, and now I'm going to get my middle value mountain. I do tend to work in sections though. Dark, then I'll do my light, then my middle, just so I don't contaminate everything. Now that middle mountain there, I think I got a little too much alcohol on that middle part. It was a little bit light, but not to worry. I pointed it out there. I can fix all of that with pastels. So my goal, what I'm going for here, I'm blowing it dry. You can see how it dries lighter. I sped this up obviously, but my goal here is to tackle that green, okay? If I was to just start painting green grasses on this surface, or even do a block in with some of this green, use the greens, the local color it's called, the color that you see in the scene, it would be really pretty flat and boring. But because I'm just zooming in so you can see, this gorgeous blues and purples underneath all of this green, that is a way to really help to tackle that green and to create a painting that has so much more vibrancy and interest. Now don't go anywhere, but this is just a quick little station break to ask if you would like this video. Hit that thumbs up, leave a comment, and of course subscribe. It really does help for YouTube to share this video to more aspiring artists. And if you want all of the extra content I'm always talking about, you can find that over on my Patreon page. This lesson has slower speeds, full commentary, lots of extra goodies, and my favorite part, it's like a family. I get to see your work, we have contests, and more. It's only $5 a month, so you can see the link there and in the description of this video. Before I start with the pastel painting portion, I want to block in just a few, or sketch in, I should say, just a few of these flowers, the ones that are more of the focal point, and to capture some of the energy and how I want this composition to pull the viewer into the painting. And my reasoning for this is I don't want to cover up the surface yet with more pastel because I kind of want those flowers to be brighter than the rest. I don't want to layer a whole lot of layers of pastel on top of some of these flowers. And now I do need to darken up some of these values again. I have a good value study. You can tell the trees are darker than the rest, but some of these trees are pretty dark. I'm not going to keep it this dark. This is believe it or not, this is a very dark, dark purple. It's by Terry Ludwig Pastels. It's called an eggplant color, and it's a really dark purple, but I'm going to layer some greens on top of this. Pastel painting is all about layering. It's not about like paint by numbers. We are layering color on top of other colors and other values. And that's really how it works in nature a little bit. Everything is really in layers. Now, I want to say one other thing about the underpainting. One of the reasons I like to do a wet underpainting like I did, whether it's water or alcohol, is I'm setting that first level. What I did by liquefying it is I'm gaining a layer back. Also, by liquefying the pastels in that first layer, they're more set to the paper. They're not going to move around as much, and it's like they're kind of embedded in the surface. Now, I have another blending tool here, my handy dandy little piece of pipe foam insulation, literally what people use to insulate pipes with. They come in round, long tubes, and you can just cut them and have a little piece to blend with. And you can see some of the pastels falling off here. That it's totally normal, and that's fine. But I'm just wanting to soften up some of this dark and get a nice, soft, moody underpainting here with some good values. Now you can see how I moved some of that dark pastel up into those grasses. Things are starting to take shape now. And this mountain that is in the middle of the layers of levels of this painting is fairly green in the reference image. I mean, it's pretty green. It's got some dark values and light values. But here's another way to tackle all that green. Start using different temperatures of green in your painting. When you have a painting that's loaded with green, we don't have to stick to always those bright, sunny, warm greens. Now, I will add some of those to this mountain like I just did a little bit there, but I always like to kind of start with a middle value first with mountains and then add my darker values. I'm adding a little bit of a cooler, just a tad darker value down at the base of the mountain. I'm speeding up the video at this portion to get to tip number 3, but again, keep in mind, over on my Patreon page, there is the full lesson, much slower speeds, and all of my commentary if you'd like to check that out. But don't worry, this lesson has all of the tips that I'm giving you for tackling green landscapes, and we'll be getting to tip number 3 soon. As you can see here, I'm carving in some of the sky color, a beautiful turquoise color, and I'm painting negatively between the clouds. I got my cloud shadows in first, and then some of the highlights, and I blended a little bit, you can see. So now, notice how I'm getting some greens in. Okay, it is a green landscape, but look at that purple peeking through. Isn't that gorgeous? And of course, we have lots of yellow flowers. And I did like the placement of many of the flowers in the reference image, and I'm wanting to keep them spontaneous and placed in ways that will enhance my composition. I see a nice little almost groove in between the trees at the end of the grasses there, and I'm trying to have the flowers to where they just enhance the viewer to come in. Now, these are some Prismacolor new pastels. They're longer rectangular sticks of pastels. They're really great for grasses. And I want to get, in the reference image, there was lots of tall grasses. I don't want to get those in, but I want to suggest them more than I want to totally spell them out. If I give too much detail at the bottom of my painting, that's the entryway for the viewer to come in. They'll get caught up in too much detail. So I like to keep things very suggestive around the perimeter of my painting. And now for tip number 3 in overcoming green landscapes, add a variety of other colors and other elements in your painting. I took the artistic liberty to add some pretty little black contrasty like seed pods. Oh, it gave such interest. And I'm also using a technique called color echoing. I'm bringing that blue from the mountain, the distant mountain, down into some of the deep grasses with some little flower shapes and suggestions. Can you see how that already broke up that majority of green in the foreground and just really gave some color interest to the painting? The harmony that's being created in this painting because of the different little places I have those turquoise colors. It's in the sky a little bit, it's in the very distant mountain, a little bit at the base of the middle mountain, and in some of the flowers. Now I'm going to lighten up just a few flowers. You'll see me do even more of that later. Give a little bit of this pretty light blue. It looked like to me in the reference image, those distant mountains may have even had a little bit of snow on them that were just a little bit light. So I just add a little idea of some lighter values to that mountain. And now is where I love this part. When you're getting close to the end of a painting, you can really start playing. You want to be careful not to overdo it, but I wanted to just make a pop of some of my lightest values. I'm getting close to the finish on this painting, adding a few other little bits of texture and brightness. And I want to show you another technique. I talk about it often. When painting trees, it's often best to paint the branches and the leaves that are kind of coming out from the tree in a negative fashion. So you see how I carved that color in? I am adding a bit more green on tops of these trees. And they end up looking so much more painterly and gestural. And now a few more pops of white for distant clouds. I wanted to zoom in here for a final touch of color at the end of the painting. I brought in more of the purplish colors. This was a bit more of a magenta color, and I usually like to do this at the end of a painting as a little bit of a spice color or a pop that just brings more beauty and color interest to the final piece. I pray this lesson blessed you and that you learned more about how to take landscapes, which, let's face it, they are often primarily green, and turn them into something magical, colorful, and beautiful. All right, everyone, I am so grateful for each and every one of you, my followers, my patrons, of course, but my subscribers and followers on YouTube. I really couldn't do all that I do without you and your support. So I hope you subscribe. Also become a patron if you'd like the extra content I'm always talking about. And as always, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. God bless and happy painting.